So, what do you do when you make questionable investments buying PLO action and it works out for you? Of course, you book a trip to Vegas so you can punt it off. And I'm not gonna let a potential punt go unreceived. This is Raffi.
Hello, I am Mark Cuban.
No, you're Raffi.
I'm Raffi.
Plays poker for fun, always willing to sweat some of my action. And this weekend, he's my VIP whale, and I'm here to give him the VIP whale treatment he deserves. Just like how some casinos provide their high rollers with everything they need, I'm gonna go ahead and offer him free limo pickup from the airport. I'll get him a room at the newly renovated Augustus Towers at Caesars, my treat of course. And I'll also provide him with whatever else he needs before he starts blasting off at the tables. Unexpected request, but dental hygiene is important. The room looks nice and our whale seems pretty satisfied. It's time for me to settle up our prior poker investment, and I go ahead and pay him out his ammo for the trip. Of course, I gotta pay out part of it with a poker chip, as we're trying to get him to come play some PLO with us at Aria. The stage has been set, our whale needs to rest, and it's soon time to see if Texas poker players live up to the hype. So this session I somehow convinced Raffi to sit directly on my right. He knew I was going to record it for the vlog, but what he actually didn't know was that I had decided to make things interesting by playing any 4 cards anytime he chose to enter the pot. What I didn't actually know though was that Raffi is a huge nit. So this idea ended up with very little impact on the session, and I'm pretty sure Raffi didn't even notice I was trying to do this. It probably saved me a bunch of money in the end. Anyways, here's the session. First hand, I get dealt Jack 8-2-4 under the gun, and Raffi's in the big blind, but I had decided I'd just play normally when he's in the blinds, so I end up just folding the first one here and not forcing myself to play. Hand number 5, low jack, who's a pretty loose action guy, opens to 15 and I 3-bet in the cutoff to 50 with aces, and we go heads up. We're only 5 hands in, but let's just say I saw a hand earlier where he shoved all his chips in with a gutter and a 7-high flush draw on the flop that ended up winning, so we got a bit of a loose cannon read on this guy. Flop is 10-4-7 all diamonds, and I have the naked ace of diamonds, so I bet 35 into 105, and then he pots to 210. This is a really stupid spot. So I actually have 3 options, all of which are going to be read dependent on my opponent. I could jam bluff and hope he folds a lower flush, but he's definitely not folding a set, and if he's the type to check raise a flush, which is just a weird line, I have no confidence he'll fold to a jam with that. I could flat here and hope he reads me for nut flushes, because if I bet call the raise here, I could definitely have a nut flush. This line requires my opponent to be capable of thinking at this level, which again, I have no confidence in. And I'll also feel really stupid if he just ends up jamming turn and I wasted $200 on a float with basically no equity. So, it's just one of those spots where my opponent takes a pretty nonsense line in theory, and I just have to make a reluctant fold just because I have no faith in my opponent's ability to fold here. Hand number 8, I'm under the gun again with garbage and I fold, but Raffi here plays his hand, and since he plays like no hands this session, we're going to cover this one. Button, who's a reg and also a viewer of the channel, knows I'm recording with my buddy here, but unfortunately he gets moved to the main game right after this hand. It's very unlucky for him because what he doesn't know is that no one in the world runs better than Raffi, so he's about to get whacked. Button raises after a couple of limpers to 25, and small blind calls, and Raffi 3-bets to 110, and both players come along. Flop is King 7-4 rainbow, and there's 340 in the middle, and everyone's playing like 380 effective, So I think Raffi has a pretty straightforward shove in this pot with roughly 1 SPR. But this is one of Raffi's first times ever playing live PLO, so he doesn't actually know what to do in a lot of spots. And earlier I had told him PLO is easy, just play the nuts. And if he took this advice too literally, that would explain his check here. It checks through to the turn, which brings a 10 of spades, which brings in a flush draw, and Raffi now has an open ender. So if he didn't jam flop, he should just shovel it in on the turn now. But again, he goes for a check, and our button friend senses weakness and jams, and then gets snap called by Raffi. I believe Button said he was just on a draw, which ends up bricking on a river 6 of diamonds, but also giving Raffi the nut straight on the river. So I'll give Raffi a 10 out of 10 pre-flop for his play, and a 2 out of 10 post-flop. But he did end up with the nuts in the hand, so you know what? He listened to my advice and gets a 9 out of 10 overall for playing the nuts. Nice hand. Couple hands later, Raffi comes in with a raise to 15, and I'm forced in with a pretty junky ace 10 5 9 in the cutoff. It goes 5-way, and flop comes king jack 4 all spades. And when it checks to me, I fire 30 into 75 with my naked ace of spades blocker. A lady in seat 2 on the short stack calls, and again, we're in another really stupid spot here with a blocker. The problem here is that after her call, she's sitting on a $200 stack, and there's already $135 in the middle. Bluffs and blockers are more effective against larger stacks as they're aware of the threat of facing 3 streets of pressure, and they just have a lot more to lose by being wrong. Short stacks don't really have to worry about this as much, so it's always annoying to think about trying to bluff a short stack. Again, it becomes read dependent, and when the turn brings a 7 of diamonds, I decide I'll go for it, but I'll use kind of a stupid sizing sequence. It's really natural to bet large or pot on the turn with nut flush here, as the opponent will have a lot of sets, which you'll need to protect against. But I bet 65 into 135, just because, again, I don't think my opponent will pick up on my sizing tell here. I can just fold my hand if she does something weird and jams, and I can also shove river for 135 into 265, which obviously has more fold equity than if I potted turn and tried to shove 65 into 405 on the river. Doesn't really end up mattering in the end, cause thank God she just snap folds face up and shows the ace jack 4-5 flop 2 pair. What a sweat. Hand 25, seat 3 limps, and the loose action guy from the first hand of this vlog makes it 20. Now, ace jack queen queen single is actually a very underrated hand to 3-bet that I think most people wouldn't do. And I usually won't always do it in a live setting because the ranges are so tight with all the limping, but this guy is way too loose, so I have no issue 3-betting this hand out of the big blind. Seat 3, who's a tight medium stack, comes along, and so does our aggro button player. Flop is absolute gold with queen 6-5 rainbow, and I actually opted check here because the button has shown propensity to be aggressive when check 2. Seat 3 checks and button bets, but he only bets 40 into 210. Now, if I want to pot, I could make it 350, but I really want to keep him in, and I only have a stack of about 400 here. And if I raise small, I don't think this guy will go anywhere just based on his vibe. I make it 170, and this basically pot commits me on any turn run out to go with it, but it doesn't even end up mattering as seat 3 folds and button instant jams, and we get it in and run it once where I go runner improvement to a straight. I thought I heard him announce set when the river came out, so I guess the money was always going in anyways, but I still like checking to this particular player in my spot. I mentioned how tight I felt seat 3 was, and the next hand sort of demonstrates that. Hand 41, I got a triple suit trash hand, but it's got nut clubs on the button, and seat 3 has just limped in, so I figure it's worth a limp behind on the button, and I think playing against passive tight players should be easy post flop. Flop comes queen 9-9, and it checks to me, and I throw out a $10 bet into 15. Big blind folds, and seat 3 calls. I'm immediately concerned that he has a 9 here since he's so tight, and I just expected my flop bet to win the pot like 70% of the time or something. Turn brings a jack, and he checks, and I quickly check back. River brings another queen, and he checks, and since I believed him to have a 9, I just went for a value here, and I bet $10 into $35 targeting this guy's 9x. He snap calls me, and I turn over my ace queen, and I'm both shocked and unsurprised to see him turn over jack-jack 9-3. Shocked because this is such an easy check raise on the river or value bet himself, but I'm also not surprised at all because this guy might have been a bigger nit than Raffi. Speaking of Raffi, next hand is pretty interesting and it involves him, so let's take a look. So hand 53, seat 2, the lady from earlier, limps in middle position, and there's another limper, and Raffi limps here with King Jack 6-8 double suited in the small blind, which I probably would have raised, and I also come along in the big blind with Ace 4 9 10, nut clubs in the big blind. Clubs one time. I flop top 2 on a board of Ace 9 7, and since the field is all passive nits, I just take the lead and bet 15 into 20. Lady in seat 2 calls, and Raffi comes along with the nut straight draw here, which is pretty standard. Turns a 5 of spades, so Raffi turns the nut straight and a spade redraw, and he decides to lead for 50, which I think is fine. I basically put him 100% on 6-8 here because he's so tight. And I didn't backdoor my club draw, and I felt like I'm either sharing outs with this lady in seat 2, who probably has Ace-X, or she also has 6-8 herself and is going to re-raise me out of the pot. So either way, I think this becomes a pretty straightforward fold. The lady in seat 2 calls. River brings a jack of diamonds, and Raffi very quickly bets 110 into 165. C2 snap calls him, and she actually shows her ace king 8-7 without any spade draw, which if you have been paying attention to how Raffi's been playing is probably a pretty terrible call. And I think Raffi's play on the river is also fine, although I think he should have taken a little bit of time to think about if she could have 8-10. There was no flush draw on the flop, and he saw me lead flop, so I'm probably usually repping 2 pair or better on the flop. And on the turn, he's the one who turned spades, so the lady is unlikely to have spades herself, so that actually weights a decent part of her range to 8-10 type draws. All in all, I'll give Raffi a 9 out of 10 for this hand, and a 1 out of 10 for being a disappointing whale. So I'm in this game for 600 and cashed out 974 for about 374 profit. Raffi was kind enough to send me the hole cards for all 7 of the hands he played, but he did crush me in profit, so even if you don't know what you're doing in this game, just play good hands pre-flop and you'll be alright. I guess the takeaway from this session is that sometimes when you're so focused on bum hunting a whale, you lose sight of the fact that you may be the whale yourself.